a year where it felt like the Bears were reshaping and redefining their future, they've found themselves plunked right back to where they've always been. Since 2017, when general manager Ryan Pace traded up to get Mitch Trubisky number 2 overall, foregoing some guys who have since played better, the Bears' offense, specifically their passing offense, has been a rudderless ship, lost and without direction. After Trubisky's play slowly declined over the years, he took the fall, while something strange happened. Both Nagy and Pace retained their jobs and were once again allowed to reshape the organization's future and play with the hearts of every Bears fan in the country. Allowing Pace to draft another quarterback after he'd failed so miserably the first time was a ballsy move by ownership, but the initial returns after snagging Justin Fields 11 overall were met with high praise. Maybe it was all Trubisky's fault and Nagy just needed his guy. However, so far the rookies looked like Trubisky 2.0, but how much of that is really his fault? It certainly hasn't all been on him. He's been sacked 14.4% of the time, no other QB's over 10, he's the 8th most pressured, and he's constantly getting hit right as he's throwing. While, at the same time, he's been awful in his own right. His 3.4 yards per attempt under pressure is by far the worst in the league. He is the worst rating under 2.5 seconds, the worst rating on throws of 20 plus yards, worst throwing 1 to 9 yards, worst under pressure, and worst when not blitzed. So between him or Nagy, or Pace for constructing this roster, it's difficult to figure out who is the one guy at fault. So today, we'll look at all 3 areas and do our best to figure out who is exactly to blame. Starting with the way Pace has built this depleted roster, specifically the Bears' offensive line, the unit is point blank the worst in the league. After cutting both their offensive tackles shortly after drafting Fields, and then a slew of injuries, which has required a constant reshuffling of guys playing out of position, Fields has gotten sacked a league-leading 22 times despite taking half as many dropbacks as the second guy on the list, and the O-line's also ranks dead last according to Football Outsiders' adjusted sack metric. It doesn't matter which protection's called, anybody on the line will get annihilated on any given play. Each individual frequently displays poor technique, poor fundamentals, and overall, they're just lacking in talent. When the Bears go to their empty sets with 5 linemen in protection, they can't hold up, and anytime any of them are asked to win one-on-one, they're constantly getting whooped at the snap, and you can tell Fields has lost faith in them. In his first career start, which came against the Browns, he was sacked 9 times and was constantly under fire. Myles Garrett practically set up camp in the backfield and finished with 6 sacks himself, but those sacks weren't all on the offensive line. Sometimes coaches deploy schemes and assignments their players simply can't execute. Before we look at why Nagy is to blame for some of the pain inflicted, I want to give a huge thank you to this week's sponsor Magic Spoon for coming back and sponsoring another episode. Finally, there's an alternative to the mind-blowingly sugary cereal that's rotting your teeth. Every day waking up, I want something that's that delicious, but getting older, I had to stop eating it to take care of my health. Well, now I can go back to being a kid and continuing to eat the good with Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon tastes exactly like the regular cereal from my childhood, but not only is it not terrible for you, it's super nutritious. It has 0 grams of sugar, 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving, plus it's also only 140 calories. My favorite flavor is cocoa, which takes me right back to 1998 with its chocolatey explosion, but really, all their flavors are good, like cookies and cream, cinnamon, and maple waffle. It's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and disgusting-free. And if you want to start out with a variety pack and get a lot of different flavors to find your favorite, you can use my promo code Rollins at checkout to get $5 off any order, or go to magicspoon.com/Rollins to save $5 today. Now, let's figure out what went wrong here. There are times when coaches overvalue how things will work on the chalkboard, but undervalue how those pieces will execute in the real-life chess match that's football. The Bears have just 5 in protection, with David Montgomery running a route, and the Browns position 7 on the line. Fields can assume that John Johnson is taking Montgomery, but still, 5 linemen for 6 potential pass rushers is a problem. If everyone's blocked, one guy is coming free, and it's on the quarterback to get the ball out quick. Assuming Johnson isn't coming, the Bears use a 3-scat protection call, which is a 3-man zone slide to the right to account for the backer and 2 linemen. On the left, that leaves Cody Whitehair, who's usually their center, and 39-year-old Jason Peters, who had basically retired this past offseason. If you are going to have a free runner, you want it to be the furthest guy outside who's unblocked, since he is the longest route to the quarterback. But in case Malcolm Smith doesn't come, Whitehair and Peters are going to dual read the 3 pass rushers. If Smith blitzes, Whitehair will close down the A-gap, but if not, he'll block Jadeveon Clowney. And if Smith and Clowney come, Peters will block Clowney and leave Myles Garrett free off the edge. This means Peters has to slowly slide backwards to read Smith and Clowney instead of immediately kicking outside to cut off arguably the best pass rusher in the game. So before the play even started, it had absolutely no shot. Nagy had Fields consistently line up in empty formations against the Browns, which wasn't necessarily a bad strategy since empty typically gets the ball out of the quarterback's hands quickly and can spread out the defense. But after it proved to be, in fact, a disastrous plan, Nagy didn't adjust, which seems to be one of his biggest flaws. Week to week, his game plans have been all over the place with a lack of attention to detail and conceptual understanding of how to optimize each individual play design. Just 1 week after the Browns game, it appeared he'd evaluated and fixed some of his planned shortcomings by keeping more bodies in protection and taking shots downfield, which plays to Fields' strengths and replicates what he did so well at Ohio State. But then the next week after that identity and plan appeared to be in place, those shot plays, for whatever reason, went by the wayside. Against the Bucs down 35-3 in the fourth, they finally did start to dust off some of those concepts that had worked so well just a few weeks prior, but the timing, execution, and design of the concepts gave Fields and the offense no chance to succeed. From the 1-yard line, Nagy dials up a shot play called doubles or 9-8-9, 2 verticals outside with a middle read route which can adjust based on coverage, but there are a few technical issues that Nagy didn't account for. Both corners are 10 yards off the line of scrimmage with zone eyes on Fields, so a deep shot would be challenging to pull off against this type of cushion. Usually to counter, offenses will install adjustments to these routes where the receivers can run curls to take advantage of the off corners, but the Bears don't do that. The protection actually does a good job, but with Pierre Desir able to vision Fields and a terribly underthrown ball, Desir easily picks off the pass. When you have a bad coach and a struggling quarterback, it's challenging to identify where the coaching starts and the quarterback play ends. Oftentimes pre or post-snap, Fields' eyes are in the wrong place, which causes disastrous results. But who's to say that isn't on Nagy for installing the concept and coaching points as such, or on Fields for not being able to execute effectively? At times, he'll check plays at the line and throw directly into the rotation of the defense, and his play under pressure, regardless of the offensive line struggles, has been a major issue. His pressure rate, like I mentioned, is the 8th highest in the league, 38%. But Andy Dalton, in the brief time he graced the field, had just a 24% rate, which ranks 41st behind the same exact offensive line. Fields hasn't shown an adequate understanding of protections or where pressure's coming from, and at times it's completely his fault and has nothing to do with the line. Once again, they're in their 5-man empty pass pro, and the Lions have 6 potential rushers up at the line, meaning they could overload the protection. The Bears have a 4-man slide to the right to account for these 4, including the nose tackle we can't really see, and Fields has to know he only has Jason Peters protecting against 2 defenders. If this extra defender comes, Fields has to throw hot to his left to David Montgomery out of the backfield, who since his defender blitzes doesn't get covered by anybody, and you can see him turn his head anticipating the quick pass, but Fields has no idea pressure's coming. Right at the snap, he should take a quick peek at the danger defender to see if he's rushing, and from there readjust to his left, knowing he's now hot off that side. But both before and after the snap, he's not looking in that direction at all. Instead, he's giving a hand signal to Darnell Mooney telling him to run a double move off this quick game concept, which is even more telling that he isn't aware of what's going on. Calling a double move when you're hot off the backside is practically suicide and gives us a little more context as to why he's constantly pressured and sacked over and over. With all of that said, he's still an immensely talented quarterback, so there have obviously been flashes of the poise, processing, and arm talent that made him the 11th overall pick. Against the Lions, where he had time and space in the pocket, the Bears unleashed their play-action deep passing game and Fields looked spectacular. First, they start with a run play called, but when Fields sees the low safety motion with the tight end and the other safety playing deep in a one-high look, he alerts and checks the Bears into a one-high beating play-action pass concept. Knowing it's man from the motion, he'll fake the run and hit Marquise Goodwin tearing away from the corner across the field. But at the snap, the Lions drop into a 2-deep cover 2 zone, which totally changes Fields' read and progression. After he turns his back and looks up, there are now 2 deep safeties and the underneath defenders are dropping into zone coverage. Goodwin, who he initially wanted, is all covered up over the middle, but Fields instantly processes that Allen Robinson's corner route hitting in between the corner and safety is the perfect cover 2 beater, and he makes, quite frankly, an elite level throw. This style of offense is really a perfect fit for Fields and the Bears since they don't need to rely on their O-line to drop back in one-on-one pass protection nearly as often. As of this moment, he's not the distributor, point guard type that Nagy wants him to be in all these empty sets, and there could be much more done to create offense with Fields' skill set. Nagy's barely dialed up concepts like mesh, which Fields ran a ton in college. He doesn't design runs for Fields like zone read or any of that, and he doesn't call hardly any RPOs for God knows what reason. The offensive line is really, really bad, but Nagy can do much more to scheme around that issue. He's put Fields and the offense in way too many bad situations where their personnel simply can't execute, and he's shown a lack of understanding of how to scheme up a defense on both a micro and macro level. Despite Nagy's incompetence, there are also some alarming areas of Fields' game that can't be overlooked, and if those aren't improved on in the coming years, he's never going to be an effective quarterback. That's not to say he can't do it, it's just right now, it's really bad. Nagy hasn't created an ecosystem for Fields to consistently get his eyes in the right place, understand where his protection issues are, or where the ball needs to go. And Fields hasn't been able to overcome his surroundings and operate at even an average level pre and post snap. Moving forward, maybe Nagy and Pace have learned from their past mistakes, and in the NFL, you often don't get a second chance, but they have. A lot of the time, the best way to find success is to learn from past failure, and these guys have certainly failed before. So far, the deck has been heavily stacked against Fields, and he's had a dire beginning to his career. For an organization that hasn't had a legit franchise quarterback since its conception, is Justin Fields the guy to bring winning back to the Windy City?